And blessed to be a part of your wake up. Kevin Miller in the morning here. Remembering President Bush, 41, we'll have a tribute to him throughout the morning. And as the nation mourns the death of the 41st president, will the media ever really understand what they did to the man? It's funny, everybody says how great a president he was, and these were the same people that drove him from office. We'll talk a little bit about that. As we start the day, boy, the snow has gotten me rolling. How about that snow over the weekend, huh? It's funny. I don't know. Many people, they get up and they're happy about the snow. I don't know about you, but I woke up and the first thing I did, I had to scrub off the dish, and then I worried about the dish here. Then I had to shovel snow before going to church. And it just put me in a bad mood. But hopefully you made it through, and we'll make it through this morning. By the way, coming up to promote our schools this week, thanks to CapEd Credit Union, Valley View on Wednesday, I believe, and Eagle High School on Friday, and then Bishop Kelly the week after. So we finish strong, promoting our schools, securing our future. Joining us now to discuss, life before Adam and Eve. There's a heady way to start your Monday. Dr. Michael Gilling. Dr. Gilling joining us once again. Good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. And boy, you guys got snow. Oh my goodness. I feel sorry for you. I know what that's like. We lived in New England for many, many years, Kevin, and that whole routine you described before church is something I'm very familiar with.
Well, there's snow, and then there's two types of snow. The snow they have in Minnesota, and you could throw in Buffalo, and you crazy New Englanders, boy, those people are so hardy up there.
I tell you, when a nor'easter hits,
yes,
boy, you just hunker down and make sure the generator has plenty of gasoline, brother, because otherwise you could be without power for a week.
And that's normal in New England, yes, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's typical. But anyway, hey, listen, look on the bright side. You're alive and well. You're at work. You're safe and sound, and you're talking to me.
That's right, and I love the name of your book, "The End of Life as We Know It." Omnibus news from the frontiers of science. Every time we have you on, I start thinking that we're doing our demo tape for Coast to Coast. But let's talk about the end of life as we know it. What do you make of these earthquakes in Alaska?
Well, it's interesting. I thought you were going to even ask me about the rumblings that we heard on the earth that weren't associated with earthquakes. That's even stranger. I mean, earthquakes in Alaska, that's pretty much, standard operating procedure, very much a part of the Ring of Fire that encircles the Pacific Ocean. It's a very tectonically active area. But I don't know if you heard about these rumblings that seismologists measured about a week ago, less than a week ago. But lo and behold, it was not associated and it was out of the Indian Ocean, but it was not associated with earthquakes. And one seismologist was quoted as saying, in all my years, I've never seen anything like that. So that's pretty interesting.
Well, indeed, and certainly here in Idaho, where we've got Mount St. Helens down the road, we've got, Old Faithful and such. You always just wonder, if not, when.
Yeah, you know what? You mentioned Mount St. Helens, Kevin, and I had the opportunity some years ago when I was still the science correspondent at ABC News. I did Good Morning America and all those shows. I actually had a chance to fly in by helicopter into the mouth of Mount St. Helens. I'll never forget the experience. I walked around, and two things that I'll never forget, even to this day, is how warm it felt underneath my feet. I could feel the heat in the soles of my shoes. And then there were these little fumaroles, these little smoke things going up. But the other thing that was so odd is a waterfall. There was a little waterfall in the crater of Mount St. Helens. It was almost like walking on the surface of Mars or something. It was so weird. But, yeah, you're in a very tectonically active area as well.
Well, and that is a concern. So let's talk a little bit how this meshes with our Christian faith.
Well, it's interesting because I'm in the middle of reading a book by a friend of mine, Brian Godawa. I know I'm supposed to be on the air promoting my own book, and I love my book, but a big shout out to Brian Godawa. He's a good Christian friend of mine. He's a good brother in Christ, and he wrote a book about the end of the world. I'm about halfway through it. It's called End Times Bible Prophecy, and he has a slightly different take on things. I'm not sure I totally agree with Brian, but it is intriguing. of course, in Revelation and elsewhere, Matthew and elsewhere in the Bible, it speaks about there going to be an abnormal number of earthquakes and that sort of thing. Very, very kind of a uptick in natural disasters. And over the years, I've covered many a natural disaster, Kevin. But that, of course, for us Christians, is a kind of the bird in the canary in the mine. It's when we start seeing these kind of uptick in natural phenomena is when, we hearken to the possibility of the second coming of Christ. I wrote a novel, by the way, I guess it was about a year ago, called The Null Prophecy, and I speak about the end times. Again, I'm not out to promote books, but since it's very apropos of our discussion right now this morning about natural phenomena and how they kind of herald the end of this age and the coming of Jesus. And I talk about it in fictionalized form. It's a fascinating action story. It's kind of an end-of-the-world thriller. It combines science and faith, called The Null Prophecy. But, yeah, that's something that I take very seriously, not only as a physicist, but as a Christian, as a very serious-minded Christian.
Indeed. Well, let's get back to your book, since you're promoting everybody but yours.
Yeah, my publicist ain't going to be too happy with me this morning, Kevin, but what the heck? I like our discussions. And, yeah, the end of life as we know it, I wrote that book because I not to scare people, but to open their eyes to what is going on in four big areas. I know we've spoken about it in the past, but in case people didn't catch that part of the show, I deal with four areas: the World Wide Web, number one; number two, artificial intelligence and robots. That's a big one. Number three, surveillance technology and privacy, also a very big one, especially now coming up on Christmas time. I'll explain that in a moment if you'd like. And then number four, genetic engineering, which, by the way, Kevin, boy, the headlines almost every day. I don't know if you caught the headline last week of this Chinese scientist out of Shenzhen, China, southern part of China, announcing the fact that he facilitated the birth of two twin girls, whose genes he edited. In other words, he took the embryos and messed with their genes and then implanted the embryos into the mom, and she gave birth to these twin girls. And it's the first time in human history that kids have been born whose DNA has been messed with. Of course, this has created a firestorm, but it's precisely what I talk about in my book, The End of Life as We Know It, in the genetic engineering section. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And let me tell you, you talk about how this meshes with our Christian faith, Kevin. This is big time. Now, most of the book I spend just telling people how it is, but that final chapter, I do allow myself a little editorializing, both as a physicist and a Christian, and say, what kind of world are we creating? Is this the world we want? And then I ask myself the question, how does this mesh with what the Bible speaks about in terms of the end times? And is it possible, Kevin, and I'm just raising this question for you and your listeners to think about, is it possible that the Lord is using science somehow to hasten the end times? Because some of the stuff that you'll read about in this book, it's not all gloom and doom, there's some good stuff, but some of the things you read about in this book that are going on right now, not in the sweet by-and-by, but right here and right now, boy, you wonder if it isn't going to help bring about the end time. It gives you something to think about, that's for sure.
Indeed. Dr. Michael Gillian joining us, Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. See, I believe the AI is not going to be good for us. We've talked about this before. What are your thoughts?
Uh-huh. Yeah, on the whole, I'm trying, I still think the jury is a little bit out. Let me be generous by saying that, okay? I try not to hype things one way or another in this book. I really do try to be a straight shooter, okay, Kevin? And I think you know me well enough by now that people can count on me. All those years at ABC News, and still today I do stuff on Fox and Fox News, and I respect people, okay? I respect my audience. I always have and I always will. I want them, in the era of fake news, I want them to know that when they come to Dr. Gillen, whether they see me on TV, listen to me on the radio, or read my op-eds on Fox News, they're going to get the straight poop. And I tried very hard to be an honest broker of information with this book. But when it comes to AI, let me just tell you this. In previous industrial revolutions, whether we're talking about steam or electricity or computer revolutions, more jobs were created than were destroyed. Many jobs were destroyed, but many more were created. Silicon Valley was created out of the computer revolution, remember, okay? Silicon Valley did not exist before the computer revolution, okay? So it did away with typewriters and that sort of thing. But having said that, the hope might be then that artificial intelligence and robots will do the same, that it'll reiterate history, that yes, it will destroy jobs. It already is, and I documented in the book. There's no argument about that. It is destroying jobs. On the average, one robot destroys about 5.5 human jobs, okay? That's the statistic right now. The question is, will it create then more jobs, different kinds of jobs, than it's destroying? And there the jury is still out. The reason I doubt that will happen, the reason I worry, and again, I talk about it in the book, is because whereas previous revolutions, the steam, electricity, computer, targeted horses, targeted hand-crank devices, targeted typewriters, this revolution, the AI revolution, targets you and me and the listeners. They target us, human beings. Robots and artificial intelligence, by design, by intention, are meant to replace us, hook, line, and sinker. My people say, well, no, because humans are going to be needed to repair robots. Wrong. Well, no, humans are going to be needed to create robots. Wrong. Because right now, for example, the Swiss government just announced that they're going to be spending beaucoup bucks in China. And by the way, this Swiss company is the largest maker of industrial robots, and they just announced that they're going to be opening a factory in China to create robots. And guess what? The entire factory is automated. So we're going to have robots making robots. All right? So my feeling right now, Kevin, if I had to bet, if you really put me against the wall, my honest impression is that AI and robots spell big trouble for us, big trouble. And I tell stories. Tell the story of a woman who lost who lost her job 3 times to a robot. Not once, not twice, 3 times. The poor woman is just trying to make a living. And I quote her saying, what am I going to do? How do I help earn a living for my family? And whereas people worry about, especially in science fiction, you'll read about how the robots rise up against humans. I don't worry about that at all. The thing I think we need to be concerned about seriously, and I talk about this in the book, and it's not just me. Some big macas at Silicon Valley are also worried about this, believe it or not, that humans are going to rise up against robots because of what's going to happen to humans. We get a little flavor of that over the Thanksgiving holiday when people at Amazon rose up and struck against Amazon because Amazon is becoming increasingly automated. More and more. Amazon's warehouses are being automated, and people are sick and tired of it, people who are working for Amazon. You keep an eye on Amazon workers because I think that is a bird in the canary. That is a canary in the mine, rather. I think that where Amazon is kind of leading the way in terms of that. They're big-time automation, but not just them. McDonald's is automating. You now have a robot I talk about in the book that can make a hamburger. So I have a 19-year-old son. Come summer, he's looking for a summer job. He worked for Sonic last summer. Well, as more of these burger joints get automated and you have robots making hamburgers, where does a boy like my son, or I don't know if you have children, or your listeners' children, these entry-level jobs are being taken over by robots. So where do our kids go to get used to working? This is the problem. We don't have enough time to get into the details. I get into the book, The End of Life as We Know It. I get into all of this in the book because I want people, not to scare people, but to open their eyes to what's going on. There's good stuff in there, and I want people to have their eyes open to the good stuff so they can avail themselves of that. But I want them to have their eyes open to the bad stuff because I want them to be able to protect themselves and their families. It's very real, Kevin. What we're talking right now is not science fiction. This is the world we now live in and that my son and other young people are growing into. They need to know what's going on.
And Dr. Gillen, if people want to get your book, where can they get it?
I say Amazon's the easiest way to go, and it's a bestseller, Kevin. It's real. I think people really like it, but they can Barnes and Noble anywhere. And I really appreciate the time to talk to you about this stuff, because again, this is not about selling books, folks. This is about opening your eyes to what is going on, so that we can influence the direction that we go in as a society. But you can't influence anything if you're ignorant. Inform yourself first. And as Christians, remember, we have a special responsibility on this earth. We have a special responsibility on this earth. We need to be better informed than anybody else. God wants us to give him his best, and that begins by informing yourself, because you cannot give anybody your best if you're ignorant, if you're in the dark. So buy the book to get smart, and then do something about it. Raise your voice. Influence the direction of our country, of our nation, of our beloved nation. Steer it towards a great future, not a grim future, until one day the Lord will come and take us up with him. But in the meantime, we can't just be like ostriches with our head in the sand. We need to open our eyes to what's going on and influence the direction of our great nation.
Dr. Gillen, we appreciate it. You have a great day, sir.
You too. God bless you, brother. Take care.
God bless. All right. Remember that book, The End of Life as We Know It, Dr. Michael Gillen. The End of Life as We Know It, ominous news from the frontiers of science. Boy, what a way to start our Monday. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And I'm Kevin Miller, remembering President Bush dying at the age of 94. Poppy Bush, one of the last good men, one of the last true believers to occupy the Oval Office. Let's go to the phones. For your calls, we go to R&R on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, R&R.
Thank you so much. I'm just honored to be able to add a voice of reason to the alarmist. The man used the word ignorant, and ignorant, it really means to ignore the obvious and to just trust in the Lord with all your heart and soul and lean not to your own understanding. I had so much joy yesterday lifting the heavy snow and scooping it away from the sidewalks and cleaning the paths, so that my fellow residents that were ready to join in voice and believe in God were on time, and nobody slipped and fell. And this beautiful little neighborhood I live in, the maximum speed during daylight hours is 35 inside the entire county. There's no need for anything other than a sleigh ride and trolleys, but yet people are out there. They think they got to get in their vehicles that they're mortgaged to, and their houses they're mortgaged to. The voice of reason, I got to just stand up for somebody that got snarky last week, and our governor-elect, brother, Mr. Honorable Governor Little, anybody wants to call him Gumby or whatever, I wish they would talk to his sister first. I said a long time ago, I haven't met Brad Little's mother because she's no longer alive, but he has a sister named Judy, and that family is so pure and so husbandry, caring for, honoring the land, taking care of the water, and they are adored. And I adore them, and I've only been around them for no more than 3 hours in my entire life. We praise the Lord that we didn't get somebody that wanted to push the boundaries like they're doing right over there in Star. Everybody could be walking to the Merc right now, and the kids nobody even needs to have their cars. We could just be on a sleigh like it was in 1924 in Idaho. And it just breaks my heart. Please slow down. Please just relax and understand that the most precious thing you have is your children and the future, and schooling doesn't have to be inside a brick and mortar, and I'm waiting for the voice of reason to follow me. Brick and mortar schools. And lastly, the prisoners have to have access to the truth. We're not a caste system. People are imprisoned and stuck because they didn't pay their bills because they didn't pay their child support, because they got evicted, because on and on and on and on and on. Desperation is stupidity. Don't let the socialist, they're not libs. They're socialist, commie, pinkos that want to steal your sovereignty. Bless you. And in the name of our God, thank you, my friend Kevin.
Thank you, R&R. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning, Kevin.
And really enjoyed being at Idaho Chooses Life on Friday night. So many of you came up and said hello. And Kent Corbett, it was when I was hearing that ad, it reminded me of my conversation with him. What a great guy. If you need something auctioned or need some advice, guidance on that, go see our friend Kent Corbett. He certainly gives so much to the cause, and we appreciate him being there every year at Idaho Chooses Life. Coming up, your phone calls. Tom Munns, hang on. We're going to get to you in a minute. First, out to Capitol Hill. Rachel Sutherland, Fox News Radio on KIDO Talk Radio, joins us exclusively here. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Not bad. Just interested to see the Washington reaction to the death of President Bush.
Absolutely. We got the call about 1 a.m. That he had died surrounded by family and friends at his Houston home. And Secretary of State James Baker, who served under President Bush, was actually there and conveyed some of what went on in the final moments to Fox News Sunday, saying that his last words were, "I love you." And that was to his son and former President George W. Bush, who then said in return, "Dad, I love you, and I will see you on the other side." And so really to die at home surrounded by loved ones, and we're hearing it was a gentle, peaceful passing. Really, you can't ask for more than that. And looking at his long life and career, 94 years old, World War II pilot, and was shot down, and was, I guess, the only one to survive that, and had some survivor's guilt over that. His resume, just when he began to start to believe it, U.S. Congressman, ambassador to UN, chairman of the Republican National Committee, chief of the U.S. Liaison Office of China, director of the CIA, and, of course, vice president under Ronald Reagan until he was elected president. So that's only on his professional side. And then there's all this much to be said about his life as a husband and father, married to the same woman for 73 years. I believe he had upwards of 17 grandchildren, 8 great-grandchildren. I just can't imagine being surrounded by such love.
Indeed, and a life well lived. And Poppy Bush loved his wife, his family, and his sons. He was so proud of his family. And what a balance and an example to all of us. Here you have a man that achieved so much, and yet his family was always first.
Absolutely. You think about his relationship with Barbara Pierce Bush, who really died about 7 months ago. I was kind of surprised he lasted as long as he did, considering how long that they were married. Apparently, she said that it was basically love at first sight. She saw him, and that was it. She said he was the only boy she ever kissed, and it was one and done for her. And I think he felt the same way. And then they went on to have these children who were so successful. But he also had his lighter side. With the skydiving and the things he enjoyed doing. In fact, he took a dive on his 75th, 85th, and 90th birthdays. And one of them, I was talking with Fox News analyst Britt Hume over the weekend, and he conveyed a story where he said that he wanted an interview, a one-on-one with the former president, and in order to get it, he said, well, you have to come dive with me. And Britt was like, I had no interest in anything like that. But then he ended up getting talked into it and did a tandem dive and was able to get that interview. So it seemed like he had a really great sense of humor. And I've heard that he would, not only on the national level with some of the press, but even when he'd go places, he'd talk with the local reporters just as equally. Indeed,
President Bush will be remembered in his great friendship with James Baker. I still go back to 2000. And it was so up in the air with the Chads and everything else. And it was documented in that HBO series with Kevin Spacey. But the idea that you had James Baker come in and save the day in Florida. And Baker, spent a lifetime serving the Bushes and being his friend. And, that really shows, again, President Bush and the value of relationships that he had. What will happen this week in Washington to remember him?
Well, this is the schedule here in just about an hour or so. We will see Air Force One depart Ellington Field in Houston, bound for Joint Base Andrews. There'll be an arrival ceremony there, and then a motorcade to the U.S. Capitol, another arrival ceremony. That's for late this afternoon. Then the former president will lie in state in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol, and that'll go on through this evening until Wednesday morning at 8:45. There will be a guard of honor in attendance at all times. I can just imagine the lines. I'll probably be able to see them, when I walk out of my office. Just look over to the right. There's the Capitol building. People will be lined up. A lot of busyness around the Capitol today. Then there will be a funeral at Washington National Cathedral on Wednesday morning. President Trump and the First Lady will be there, along with former presidents and dignitaries. And I expect President Trump to give some short remarks there. Then there'll be a departure ceremony. The remains of the former president will be sent back to Houston. There will be a ceremony at St. Martin's Episcopal Church. He will lie in repose. There will be a funeral service. And then final burial is Thursday at George Bush Presidential Library and Museum.
Rachel, we could go on, but I've got to be respectful of your time with you're so busy. But we thank you for this update. You have a great Monday.
Thanks, Kevin. You too.
All right, our friend Rachel Sutherland. Let's go to Tom Munns on an action-packed Monday with Kevin Miller in the morning on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Kevin.
Good to hear from you.
Thanks for having me on this morning.
Thanks for your patience.
Well, I was listening to, every time I hear this, we've got this guy. First of all, I got to ask, when's that? I was waiting for that voice of reason that was supposed to come on. I guess I just didn't hear it. But, I think the average American is kind of funny. We idolize the establishment on one hand, and then we condemn it on the other. And, we watch Mandela, and Time Magazine does this thing about how great of a patriot he was. And then we've got, the writings of Castro and how great, how great that scenario is. And then you've got, John McCain. They do a tribute to John McCain. Now we got one on George Bush, and I kept thinking, what is it with everybody that has this idol worship for the establishment when they complain about it on one hand and celebrate it on the other. And so I think I had to ask, whether Bush was actually a conservative. I mean, he was the director of the CIA. The CIA went rogue decades ago when they had all these covert, unexposed operations that were completely taking out foreign countries. He's been a longtime member on the Council on Foreign Relations, which is the head of the deep state. He and his family are all about the New World Order, which completely undermines American sovereignty. He was a member of Harvard's Skull and Bones, and he's a neocon warmonger. The whole family is. I
don't think you'll be given the. I don't think you'll be giving the memorial there at his service, Tom.
Well, I'd love to do the eulogy, but here's the thing, okay? So I'm not so insensitive to think that he wasn't a good man to his family. Hitler was good to his family, I'm sure. Maybe Stalin and Mao. I mean, all of these people that did historically bad political things were not hated by their family, or their family probably would have offed them and buried them in the backyard. So I have respect for family members on that level.
Now, wait a minute, Tom. You're comparing President Bush, God rest his soul, to Stalin, Hitler, and Mao?
No, I'm talking about the differentiation in our understanding between politics and family. My point is that he's done some horrific things as a politician that somehow we're worshiping because the media is doing such a great job at keeping us ignorant. But I'm trying to separate the family issue, saying that I understand that Barbara Bush has had, how that affects the family, but we've got to, as Americans, understand what idol worship of an establishment man that has some serious issues dealing with America. If he's a true American, I need to move.
Because Tom, I think you should pack. I think you should pack your bags, because I believe I believe if you ask people on this program, they would all say that George Bush was a great American.
I know, and that's what scares me, and that's why
he led the coalition in the Gulf War. He was there when the Berlin Wall came down. He did renege on his no new taxes policy, but he was a good man. Now, we may disagree with the New World Order and everything else, but some people listening, Tom, and I might be with them, and we can agree to disagree, might think that you're off base on this one. What do you think?
Well, when we agree to disagree, that's fine. But here's the thing: if you're going to disagree just because of an opinion, or if somebody's going to disagree by opinion with somebody that's laying facts out, it's okay to do. You have the freedom to do it. The problem is what unintended consequences come along with that. So, I don't spout rhetoric. Some people look at me as entertainment, and that's great. But I'm sharing all of the information that I read because it's part of my job to read. And I want to be able to try to share information with people that they need to know, whether they choose to believe it or not. America is still on this downward slide, and people just can't understand why. Well, until people start reading and start understanding that some of the stuff that we're talking about is real, we're going to continue down that road. So,
but you go back to honoring a man who served his country. What's wrong with that?
Well, what does serve mean anyway?
He was a president. He was a vice president. He served his nation.
Yeah, but should we celebrate Franklin Delano Roosevelt too?
Yeah, we do in D.C.
And the administrative state? Nah, no way. I ain't buying it. Then we might as well celebrate. We might as well celebrate all of the world's dictators, just because America is it's kind of this funny thing, We have all of this influence, but we've probably got the dumbest population. They teach about the New World Order. They teach about the Order of the Illuminati in Europe, but they don't hear. Why?
So you would tear down the FDR Memorial?
I don't know if I would. That's a tough one. I'd have to think
You're saying
about
honoring. Do we honor FDR? But we do. He's got the biggest memorial in D.C. He was the president that served the longest.
Socialist. That's because that is proof of America's socialism. He created the administrative state that circumvented Congress as the only entity that was supposed to make law, and now we complain about the bureaucratic state while we're lifting up FDR. We live in loony land. You can't do that and be consistent.
A lot of people would say this program is loony land, but we welcome it. Tom Munns, anything else, sir?
No, yeah, that's all you want to do is give me more time.
You're fired up today. We appreciate it, brother.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye. If you want to follow Tom Munns, TomMunns.com, Munns Tom on Twitter. Our phone number, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Honoring President Bush, although Tom has some issues with that. We would love to get your thoughts on that. Here is James Baker recounting the president's last words.
Chris, only one of his children was living in Houston, Neil Bush. Neil and his wife Maria were there. My wife Susan and I, his rector from our church, St. Martin's Church in Houston, the doctor, some of the wonderful aides that took care of him in his later years. And it was a sweet situation. They made arrangements for all of his children to call in to in effect tell him goodbye. And his last words, the last words George Bush ever said were, "I love you." And he said those words to 43, President George Bush 43, who had called in to say, "Dad, I love you. I will see you on the other side." And President Bush said, "I love you," and those were his last words.
There we have it. Your thoughts next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
Now, the 28 countries with forces in the Gulf area have exhausted all reasonable efforts to reach a peaceful resolution, have no choice but to drive Saddam from Kuwait by force. We will not fail.
Amazing when you think about that. We will not fail. President Bush, dead at the age of 94. President 41. Tom in Nampa joining us now on KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller in the morning. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. morning, Kevin. I think Bush, while he wasn't the best president in the world, I think he did a pretty good job. I voted for him twice. And certainly with the situation where he went to battle in the Middle East, at least he had an exit strategy that we got out of there rather quickly afterwards. Some people faulted him for not pushing on to Baghdad, but I don't know, in retrospect, maybe it wasn't a bad call because I think he would have been bogged down like we had worked for several years under his son. But, that caller, a couple calls back that said we're the land of lunacy, and he was comparing Bush to, was mentioning Hitler and Stalin in the same breath. I think he's kind of evidence that he's one of the people that I would call kind of a lunatic. I don't necessarily have to agree with every president to think they were a good president. I think the four great ones that I admired the most in the 20th century were Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, Truman, and Reagan. They come to mind as the four greatest of the 20th century. And I didn't always agree with everything that each one of them did, but I think they proved to be fine leaders. And, it's a pretty tough job being president of the United States, whoever you are. And I think that even when Obama, when he passes on, I'll probably just keep my peace and shut up rather than right during the morning period of family and friends call up a talk show if I'm still alive and pick it as a time to pick him apart, even though I don't think he was a good president at all. That's about all I got to say today.
Thank you, Tom. Traffic and weather together on 107.5 FM.
I'm just Channel 7's Rick Everett.
And I'm Kevin Miller. Quickly to Hank. Hank, we've got about a minute. It's yours on KIDO Talk Radio.
Okay, I won't go as far as with Tom Munson to say, that Bush was essentially a good man. But the problem with Bush is, and this is true with all your moderate Republicans, they don't realize the Democrats are at war with this country and that they don't share the same values as the country as it's conceived. They want to change the country into something else. And when Bush compromised on the no news taxes, when they fought to the end there, go along to get along, they destroyed the country. And when his son was president, when he wouldn't fight back his critics or his determination, he led to the great defeat of the Republicans in Congress, and we ended up with Obama. The Bushes were good, but I don't think they essentially understood the nature and still don't understand the nature of the modern day Democrat Party.
Great call, Hank. We'll continue on with that. Kevin Miller, we're just getting started on KIDO Talk Radio. Fox News next on 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning.